Good afternoon, everyone. The clicker works. Which button? Sorry. Green? Okay. Thank you for your kind words, Geertz. This is a great opportunity, great privilege to be here in front of such a distinguished audience, representing Ministry of National Defense of Lithuania. We do have some exciting things happening on our front, and really it's a pleasure to share these ideas with you all and to see where we can go from here. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for organizing this event, of course. This is the second year in a row that it's happening. I remember just a year ago when it was running, and I know we at Ministry of Defense thought, well, would love to be part of this because there's so many things happening at the Ministry of Defense, at the Lithuanian Army level, in terms of building infrastructure, in terms of all this sort of long-term creation of long-term assets, essentially on our balance sheet in Lithuania at least, and I'm sure in other Baltic states. But I think, honestly speaking, I don't think we were at that point yet where we were ready to talk. But I think now we are ready to talk. We have hired some people. We've launched the PPP projects that were approved by our state PPP commission just over a week ago. In a couple of weeks, we will receive a formal government permit to launch a tender for that. So, exciting times indeed. And now, I do speak from a sort of three-hatted approach. I had been a military officer for quite a few years. Then I was in sort of international finance as a banker, corporate banker, as a securitization, sort of origination of securitized bonds banker. So I'm quite familiar with a lot of stuff. But again, what comes together is really when you can combine your skills, you combine your experiences to something to do even greater. So at this political job, and I know the panel right before me here very nicely discussed different political risks that are in the market, and I hope that in my several 3 or 4 slides here, I'll be able to somewhat mitigate the concerns, mitigate the possible risks that are very natural in this sector, in the long-term asset sector, and especially in the PPP environment. Now, my aim here again is twofold. First is to provide a broad overview of what Ministry of Defense, military, and NATO as an alliance do. Now, this will be somewhat political, somewhat talkative, less numbers, but I'll explain at the end. I hope I'll connect that to why it is important, why it actually mitigates and minimizes the risks. The second aim is really to provide attendees of the forum of this investment opportunity that's coming up in Lithuania. And what's interesting about this opportunity is, I think for many investors, I believe, is that it transcends the boundaries of defense capability, readiness building, social economic welfare. The panel right before me talked about ESG, the whole green investing. These bases that we will build, they will have that component of environmentally friendly construction. So that all combines into a very interesting opportunity, a very interesting potential for investors and for other partners in the project. So now, okay. All right, this is the slide. So let me start by describing a broad mandate that we as government must deliver. Everything that we do at the Ministry of Defense revolves around Lithuania's national security strategy, and it can be condensed into one word. It's deterrence. What we're trying to do, essentially, and deterrence is a psychological state of mind. What we're trying to do is that to make sure that a potential adversary, and there are some countries in this neighborhood that are behaving in a certain way. When they look at us, when they look at Lithuania, they look at the Baltic states, they look at our region, they make the calculations and they think, well, this doesn't make sense to attack. This doesn't make sense to harm these countries, to have aggression against them. So our job is as the government, is to ensure that deterrence works. Now, to achieve this state of mind is really, we're focusing on three axes, and they are really the 3 big boxes: military capability, the partnerships, and resilient society. Now, the military capabilities, quite obviously, that falls, and this is something that falls under my bucket of responsibilities at the Ministry of Defense, is the basically modernization of our capabilities through procurement, is development of readiness by investing in infrastructure as well as in the defense industry sort of aspects. But the capability itself, I think it's very clearly, we can say this is something what we need to do. And the infrastructure development, that the PPP projects fall directly under this, and they align very well with our strategy of how to achieve deterrence. Now, there are other aspects, such as resilient society. These units that we're building, basically the infrastructure of 3 military bases, will house a lot of conscripts. Now, conscripts, the conscription that has been returned to Lithuania over a certain break several years ago, it includes members of the society. These are young men and women who come and serve, and so I think we do have that debt to the society in terms of creating great infrastructure for them to develop, for them to train, for them to grow as human beings, as soldiers, as citizens. Now, another important aspect to this is a belief, a conviction, an axiom, I think, that effective deterrence creates an environment where social, economic, and cultural activity can prosper. And with that, I think the society will prosper as well. The people will prosper. So again, this is a very, I'm going back a bit with how to really, before I even started talking about the projects, but it's essential that we understand the true purpose of what we're trying to accomplish here. Now, essentially what I wanted to show with this slide is that infrastructure development is critical for building defense capability. And that subsequently is critical for our deterrence posture. So the message, I think, should serve us as a political risk mitigant. I think, with the Ministry of Finance approval, with the PPP Commission approval, and with the upcoming governmental approval, there's the current government or next government, it will never step back from this project. This is too important to create capability, too important to create deterrent, to ensure that deterrence works. It's critical for the whole of society. So our goal is pretty clear. We want to strengthen deterrence, the capability through building infrastructure for our military units. Now, again, there will be three military bases that will be developed in a sort of regional, in the regions of Lithuania, in Šilalė, Šiauliai, in the neighborhood of Vilnius, creating 3 battalion-sized units with all the necessary infrastructure, including administrative, technical, as well as support facilities. We're not talking about catering per se, because I think provision of food and catering, that's something that is a critical capability that military needs to maintain. So we're really talking about infrastructure, and all the supporting things that come with it. This is, again, a more detailed breakdown of the projects. It's a 15-year project with two-year build-up and a 13-year repayment. Again, 3 projects: design, construction, and maintenance. We assume that it's about 30 million euros per project of initial investment. The calculated net present value of these projects, when we include maintenance and reinvestment, probably is about 55 million per project, so 165 million euros, 25,000 square meters in area for each unit. And the key thing here is that what we're rushing to is the 2020, the 4th quarter of 2020, when we intend to sign the contract. That is, those who are probably been involved in PPP projects before know that it's a tight timeline, it's an ambitious timeline, but we very much have a very clear objective to finish it in that time. And 2035, that's a contract closure. Now, there's a timeline, again, where we are at the end of 2018. January, February of next year, there will be a tender announcement. So that's sort of the first critical day for investors and other partners. And now, to close my presentation, I think there's been a lot of discussions about how this volatile investor sort of markets environment. I think there's been a rout in the bond markets and the stock markets just over the past several days. So we know the volatility is here. Volatility in the short run, as Mohammed Al-Arian just wrote in Bloomberg, will remain in a short run. It's sort of obvious, but when important people like Mohammed say that, I think we need to listen. Volatility is here. But again, speaking about investments. I think it's a very interesting proposal. Again, putting my former banker hat, this is a quote from, the first one is a quote from Howard Marks, a famous credit investor from Oak Tree Capital, saying that future is a distribution of possibilities. And some days we just don't know what they are. But I think this can be an opportunity, I think, for all. The risks are, I don't want to say they're minimal, because you all have to assess what the risks are in real terms. But I think considering the vitality of these projects for our country, for our survivability of our country, considering that the defense budget, which is now at 2% of GDP, it's about closing at $1 billion a year, billion euros per year. It will continue to grow until 2.5% by 2027. So there's a political party agreement on this, on the increase of the defense spending, and that the amounts that are currently allocated for the repayment from 2023 to 2035, I think they're quite enormous, they're sizable, but they're pretty intact for our budgetary consideration. So I think it's from a risk perspective, again, there are always risks. With politicians and with governments, there's always going to be risks, but I think if you can assess them well, if you can get great financing, if developers are smart and there's a good competition, I think we can get to a result that is really beneficial for all parties. Now, what I also want to say is that we need to focus on outputs, and that is vital and unwavering. It's not about bickering and hitting each other with contracts when different parties get in the same room. It's really about delivering that military base, delivering the infrastructure where soldiers can live. And this is something that from our side it will be pretty much, as I said, unwavering. I think arguing is okay, but we should not lose sight of the true purpose of why we're doing this. Therefore, I think partnership, collaboration is essential, and it's, as we all know, this is a mindset thing. So it's especially when managing contracts. So rather than seeing contracts as obstacles to progress, those on all sides of PPP, I think, will need to work together towards outcomes and how to get there. So that's my short spiel. We can talk during the break, we can talk now. Either way, and again, it's a huge honor to be here. Thank you for inviting, and I look forward to working with you all and others in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. As Giedrim has actually managed, maybe you can stay for a second. Is there any particular question from the audience? Because I have one question in terms of the projects you have, I guess, rather tight timetable in front of you. I mean, do you see any immediate obstacles and things that you would need to solve before you launch fully in terms of planning and design of your facilities? Is there anything that at the moment is not solved, but you would hope in a year or 2 years' time in Lithuania this will be solved?
Well, I think, I think this is something that's been touched in the previous panel, previous panel, is the PPPs is still not the mode of operation, the very standard mode of operation. It's very hard to find people who have competence and people who have a lot of knowledge about these projects. In Lithuania, we only have several that were launched. But, the mitigating factor from my perspective is that we've hired people, we've cooperating well with the Central Project Management Agency, the ladies that were here on stage earlier. And, the timeline will be tight, but there's a lot of political will. There's political will to do this, because we know that we need to create that capability, and there's no extra budget allocations that were allocated for this budget. So I think the sort of team mindset that's essential. So I think I'm a huge believer that we can do it we can finish it by 2020 and sign the contract by the end of 2020. So
okay, good luck.
Yeah,
Any questions? Yes, please.
You can bid for 1, 2, or 3 parts essentially. So it's a three-part tender. So.
Any other questions at the moment? No, of course. Then you can meet and discuss with Giedrimas afterwards. Thank you very much.